Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Barnes, and I'm Professor of Business Management here at Lakeland. And I'd like to welcome everyone tonight, and thank you all for coming out to the Dworkin and Bernstein Management Lecture Series at Lakeland Community College. This series is brought to you by an endowment from the Dworkin and Bernstein law firm. If you haven't noticed around campus, there are a lot of signs announcing that this is the 50th anniversary of Lakeland Community College, and Management Lecture Series is joining in on that celebration this semester. Both of our speakers for this semester are both Lakeland graduates and members of the Lakeland Alumni Hall of Fame, something that all of you could potentially be in the future. Tonight we'll be hearing from Dr. Jessie Baginski, and in 2 weeks we'll be hearing from Dr. Morris Beveridge, both of whom fit in that category of Lakeland grads and Lakeland Alumni Hall of Fame people. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Jessie Baginski, President and CEO of Leadership Lake County. She joined Leadership Lake County in January 2012. She's going to talk about the organization herself, so I won't spend time on it, but she herself has 35 years of experience in communications, marketing, and management of public, private, and not-for-profit organizations. Prior to joining Leadership Lake County, she was Laketran's first director of public relations and marketing from 2000 to 2010. During that time, she earned numerous national awards for communications and was an annual presenter at the American Public Transit Association's Marketing and Communications Conference. In addition to all she does for her career, she's been a long-standing and active member of the Mentor Chamber of Commerce, the Lakeland Youth Summit, the Ohio Governor's Council on People with Disabilities Youth Leadership Forum, the Lake County Education and Workers Alliance, and Leadership Lake County. Dr. Baginski earned her Associate of Arts in Business from Lakeland Community College, her Bachelor of Arts in Management at Ursuline College, her Master of Arts in Education from Marietta College, and her Doctor of Philosophy in Urban Education with a specialization in leadership and lifelong learning from Cleveland State University. Dr. Baginski lives with her husband, Tom, and their two beloved dogs. I love that in your bio, your two beloved dogs in Mayfield Heights. Please help me welcome Dr. Jessie Baginski, President and CEO of Leadership Lake County.
All right, thank you, Chris. Well, first of all, let me start by saying it is really a privilege and an honor to be here. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say at some point. Then I started looking at the list of prior speakers and realized, whoa, that's some pretty big shoes to fill. So hopefully there will be some moments of wisdom that you'll gain tonight as you think about your careers and what you can do in your community, but also that we'll be out in time so people who need to watch the Indians can watch that game. So Chris asked me to talk a little bit about what's my story. People who know me know I have a license plate that says NOLA Girl, and that's for New Orleans, Louisiana. That's where I was born and raised. So my family is the Guidry family. My parents were married on Pearl Harbor Day. That was the only date in history class I ever remembered because we weren't allowed to forget it. So my father and mother proceeded to have 3 daughters. And then they had an 8-year gap, and then they had 3 more daughters. So the reason I am named Jessie is because they were not anticipating yet another girl. So where did I grow up in New Orleans? It was this little spot on the bottom of the map. Let's see if this has a little spot on the bottom of the map. Not too far from the French Quarter, not too far from Audubon Park. But at the top is what is the current Google Earth image of the home we lived in. And I'll point out a couple of things that when I talk in a moment, this is our main entrance, and this was my sister's entrance to her house. So this is a close-up of the house, which was really a grocery store. We grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, and when I tell people we owned the corner grocery, most people today have no idea what that meant. But what that meant was this building was a grocery store, and from here back was our house. So we never got to leave the family business, and that's what we did all the time. And so many pictures we have as kids all say Guidry's food store or Guidry's grocery, and now it's just a house, but that was our neighborhood, and we knew everyone in the neighborhood. My father was a welder, and so my mother ran the grocery, which, by the way, my parents got married in Cottonport, Louisiana, thriving town that has one stop sign. They learned English as a second language, and neither went to high school. So it's pretty remarkable the success they had in their lives with very limited education. And we are Cajun French, but I will tell you that when we were growing up, being Cajun was not cool. It was very backwoods kind of a connotation. It was a very derogatory term, so we kind of had to deal with that as we were growing up. So what did grocery life look like? Well, first of all, school and church were 5 blocks away. We walked there all the time. That's how we got there. That's how we got home. Every communion and confirmation picture was taken in front of the grocery store. You know, you would think we were starving. We had to go in and get food. As soon as we were able to, apparently I was in marketing at a very young age. Put me on my little rocking horse. I took care of the dog and promoted the fact that we had pigtails and neck bones and green cabbage for sale. So the other thing about the grocery was, as soon as you could reach the shelf, you officially were a stock clerk. And once you could reach the phone, you spoke with vendors. So we really learned about business at a very young age. At the tender age of 5, apparently, I was supposed to be stocking the beans and decided to be my own little elf on the shelf and take a nap. So that's always been the picture of me slacking on the job. And as far as how we got around, this is my older sister, Sharon. She loved sticking us in the front basket of her bike and just riding us around. Probably not at all, safety for today's standards, but that's how we got around. And it was a very interesting neighborhood because we knew everyone. And at that time, this is in the early 60s, grocery stores were really the hub of the neighborhood. We were the anchor of the neighborhood. So we knew everyone. We knew when people were on Social Security. We had accounts for every senior in the neighborhood. So if they had to stretch things between checks, they could come in and buy a 1/4 pound of rice, a couple of eggs, whatever they needed to get by. So I think from my mom, the big lesson there was, one, good customer service is important, but the other thing is compassion. We were fortunate we were at the grocery. It didn't mean we were rich because we're all working all the time, but it did mean that we were able to help the neighborhood thrive. Oops, I think I went too fast through something there. So that was our first life lesson, is that we are the community. It's not them and us, it's us. Every one of us in our own neighborhood owns our community. We are responsible for the success of our community. So the other thing, as you noticed, I have a few sisters, and most of the time my mother loved to put us in matching outfits. We all still own one of these outfits. The other times we weren't exactly fashionistas, but it got us through. And as children, we didn't all grow up together. The 3 younger sisters were definitely together in the house, but my eldest sister got married when I was 4, so she kind of was gone. But my second to the oldest sister lived in the house next door to us where that second doorway was. My father had carved out a portion of the grocery store so they would have an apartment to live in and be able to help my mom with the grocery store. Once we got older, we were inseparable. Every holiday, even if I lived in Ohio, I went home almost every year for any holiday, to the extent that my son really thought he was born in New Orleans. So this is just a Mardi Gras, and the 6 sisters and my mom on her 80th birthday, when she decided she wanted to go see Michael Flatley with Lord of the Dance, we just all piled in the car and went. And then there's extended family. Coming from a big family, How many people have seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? That is my family. They're big, they're loud, they've got lots of energy. You have to make decisions quickly. If you decide we're having pizza and you don't throw in what kind you want right away, your vote doesn't count. You're out of luck. So my cousin and I happened to be born 30 days apart. We spent all of our K-12 life together every weekend, all the time. We grew up. We were the first two in my family to leave New Orleans. That was a pretty big deal. And interestingly, our boys were born 30 days apart. So we've always been together. In New Orleans, there's a very special thing. The rest is my classmates. And in the lower corner there, the gal in the front has been my best friend since junior high. That's a long time to be best friends. We graduated from high school in 1975. But in New Orleans, they have such a high rate of nativity. People grow up there and they don't leave. So when you are one of the people who does leave, and then you come back, you're like the lost son, the lost child. Oh, you're back, you're back. To this day, when I go home, my classmates will get together somewhere and we will have a social for anyone who lives out of town when they come back in town to visit. And my husband will tell you when we're going, I go 4 days ahead of him because I have to catch up with all the high school gals before we get together. So that's life lesson number 2. Relationships are everything. I wouldn't be standing here today if it was simply on technical competency or anything else. It's all about relationships, and it's all about nurturing those relationships and valuing them. So a couple of odd things about my family. I mentioned my parents learned English as a second language. It turned into an advantage at some point because my parents were able to lease land from Shell Oil for about 25 years for a very modest price. And then we all pitched in to build this fishing camp. We just called it the camp, but it was all scrap metal that my dad had found at different jobs. So there was a couple of summers where we all learned how to sink pilings, we learned how to hang paneling, we learned how to put down tile on floors. We left the electrical and plumbing to my dad and my uncle, but it was a real family work of investment to create the camp. It wasn't fancy, but it's where we then began to spend all of our holidays out there. And we would just take big mattresses out and all the kids would be on the floor. And my father's point of pride that as soon as you were born, he would tell you how to fish. So we have so many stories of him talking to every grandchild how to fish. And as soon as they were able, he put them behind the wheel of the little shrimp boat we had. But we all learned how to shrimp. We all learned how to fish. Much to my sister's dismay, we learned how to ride in a pirogue, which, as you can tell, has a very low line in the water and can flip very easily. But we had a lot of fun with it. This is my son, who's now 30. So these are priceless memories that you really can't get anywhere else except with your family. So life lesson number 3 is value your heritage. Value those things that make your family unique. Whether it's that they speak a different language, that they have certain traditions. We have Pierogi Day at our house, it's 2 days after Thanksgiving for my husband's family, because they like pierogi, so we make pierogi. So whatever it is your family or your extended family may do, those traditions are important, but they're more important because they create a fabric of a quilt that tell us more about what we have in common than what we have in differences. Oops. So people ask, how did I get here? Well, first of all, I have not had my Ph.D. since I was 23 years old. That's a very different journey. I went to St. Henry Elementary School till 7th grade. We had the grocery store, and after a series of armed robberies, my mother said enough, so we moved out to the suburbs. So I went to public school in 8th grade knowing absolutely no one there, and it was a little traumatic. So then I ended up at Archbishop Chappell High School. And in a class of 298 all girls. Interesting fact about New Orleans schools at the time, all public schools and private schools were either all girl or all boy. There were no co-ed high schools, and we all survived. But right out of high school, I went to the University of New Orleans. I was a pre-med and chemistry major because all the guidance counselors said, you should go into medicine or you should go into chemistry. And, and I'm like, I don't even know what that means. No one in my family had ever been to college. Is there anyone in the audience here tonight who's a first college student in their family? I see a few. It's a really daunting thing because my mom thought, well, if you're only in class 6 hours a day, clearly you can work the rest of the time, and not having any idea of the prep that went in there. So due to the loss of a very dear friend in my sophomore year and the floundering I felt like I was doing, I just stopped. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to keep going to school and not know what I was going to do. So during the next 20 years, I worked in a fitness environment for a ladies' health spa. I worked for the Audubon Zoo, which was one of my favorite jobs in the world. I was a liaison between the education department and the marketing department. So it was all the special events at the zoo. It was training kids at the zoo to be volunteers. It was great, but I met my first husband who lived in Ohio, and I moved up here. Subsequently, we got a divorce, but I had my son. And so for the next 12 years, I was a single mom. So when I came up here, I thought, what do I want to do? Maybe I want to be in real estate. So I came to Lakeland, took a few courses, decided I really didn't want to be in real estate because I didn't understand some of the math that went with it. But I liked campus, so I was involved in community theater. This is me with the frizzy red hair back in 1983. And even that was kind of a fun thing about Lakeland is I came in auditioning for a dance part, and they said, oh no, you have to sing. I said, but you don't understand. If I sing, you're all leaving, because it's not pretty. So I kind of faked my way through that part of the play and just moved my lips and let the other people sing. But I came back to get my associates in business because I had been working in the print and marketing industry, and I knew I needed to make more money to raise my son, and I could not even get an interview. People wouldn't even accept my resume because I had no college degree. So I'm here at Lakeland deciding I'm going to major in business management, and I can't even tell you how thrilled I am right now today that my favorite professor is sitting in front of me. Cindy Simmerly, if you ever have a chance to be in her class, take it. She was not easy, she was tough. She was professional, and most of all, she was real. What was going on in that textbook, she had a way to explain to us what did that look like in the workplace. Now, on my bucket list one day, I want to be a Lakeland professor because I think that is the greatest gift any professor can give to their students, is to make that theory come to life when you go to work. So Cindy, forever, forever grateful that you're here. But right after I got that associate's, I also got a new job. I ended up at the Society for Rehabilitation, which was a pediatric rehab agency. And boy, things just happen sometimes. My boss came in one day and said, here's this organization. I don't have time to do this. Why don't you apply? And it was for the Governor's Council on People with Disabilities. It was an advisory council to the governor. So I applied, and then Governor Voinovich, and then subsequently Governor Taft appointed me. And it was a life-changing experience. We got to really shape what does life look like for people with disabilities in Ohio. And I was in way over my head, but no one there ever told me that. I actually met one of my mentors there, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but it was a great experience. But then I decided I probably should go on and get my bachelor's. So I went to Ursuline on weekends, some nights, some weekends, accelerated courses, you name it, we made it work. And as soon as I was done, I became the first public relations and marketing director for Lakeland, for Laketran, and I was really grateful that they sought me out. That was different than having to go look for a job. So whatever you're doing, do it really well and protect that reputation you're building there, because that's when people come to find you instead of you finding them. So here's life lesson number 4. It's never too late to learn. My husband Tom will chuckle because when I did go back again later, he's like, is this just a hobby that you have to be taking a class? And it is kind of a hobby, but you're never too late to learn things, and you're never too late to learn things you had no idea about anything about them. Oops, maybe I need to shoot it here. So while I was working and going to school, life happens. I had the fabulous fortune to marry my husband, Tom Baginski, who's here tonight. And this is my favorite wedding photo, because all of the people in that photo are people who I have worked with the Mentor Chamber of Commerce for over 30 years. There's Chrissy Weber, there's Marie Pukak, Nancy Guthrie, Bill Snow, all with our high 80s fashion going on there. We went home all the time. This is my mom and my son dancing for their 60th wedding anniversary. So we always did that. People who know my beloved dogs, sadly we lost both of our beloved dogs this year, but my beloved dogs are our beloved dogs. We went nowhere without them almost, and this was always kind of a fun thing. Whenever we would go home, all my nieces and nephews would meet us at the airport, lined up with a little sign that said, "Welcome home." Kind of the thing about never forget where you're at. Think about when somebody comes to visit you, how much effort would it take to put a sign out that says, "Welcome home"? Glad you're here. It's a simple effort, but it really makes a difference. And whenever my best friend from high school, who lived 4 doors away, would see that banner outside my mom's house, she knew I was home, and she would be there next. Oops. The other thing, while I was going to work and going to school, and what we really learn is if you're really busy, ask a busy person to do something and they'll get it done, was really figuring out, what does community service mean? What does it mean to really be part of a community? So in these photos, we have Marie Pukak with the Mentor Chamber of Commerce. If you know Marie, she is the master of relationship building. She got so many people involved and engaged, and it was a joy. It's like, oh, you need somebody to help with the beer booth, I'm there. You need somebody to help clean up, I'm there. Whatever it took, we would do. There's also Ed and Nancy Brown from Ladies and Gentlemen, Salon and Spa. Most people know them as spa owners. I know them because the first year that I did not have custody of my son on a holiday was really going to be traumatic, and it was a year I couldn't afford to go home. So Ed and Nancy said, Jess, we're going to be serving food at a homeless shelter on Thanksgiving. Do you want to come with us? That was a game changer. One simple invitation, do you want to come with us? Changed what I do in the community from that point forward. And then in the lower level, we have some folks with the Youth Leadership Forum. The gentleman in the pink shirt is Dr. Bill Bauer. I wish he could be here tonight. He'd be thrilled, because he was the one who kept saying, you need to get involved. He kept pushing me to go back for my master's, because he was convinced I should be in rehab counseling for students with disabilities. I'm like, no, Bill, not gonna happen, not gonna happen. And then on the far side, I've been with Leadership Lake County in this position since 2012. I have been a volunteer with Leadership Lake County since 1997. That was in one of our very early junior programs. So volunteering sometimes becomes a part of who you are and part of your identity. So when you think about where you can make an impact, think about what's important to you, because it becomes part of who you are at some point in your life. Now, I'll talk a little bit about Dr. Bauer again in a minute, because he was kind of a troublemaker for a while. But this is a big lesson. Be really present in your own life. Work really hard, but don't forget to play really hard. Don't forget to play, period. Because that's a big part of life, because you can work and work and work, but if you don't take time to laugh, if you don't take time to just simply be with friends, you're going to miss your own life. And this year I had the privilege of turning 60. And rather than trying to have one big party to celebrate 60, I thought I'm going to do 60 days of 60. So one of my friends bought the cheapest little 60th tiara you can imagine, and we got the most use out of that $3 tiara we could in 60 days. But the 60 days didn't mean go out and have a party every day. Some of those days, it just meant I'm going to have a cup of coffee with someone I haven't had time to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. I'm going to celebrate today by watching these deer eat the rest of my hosta out of my yard. But either way, it was about just celebrating the fact that I was fortunate enough to be here for 60 years and that I have a life I could not have imagined 30 years ago. So that was a big part of, what's the life lesson in this, is think about how fortunate we are to be here and to have a life that we have. So how does this all come together? There was a big turning moment in my life, Hurricane Katrina. August 28th, 2005, it seems like yesterday, although it was 12 years ago. It was Category 4, Category 5, or it was Category 5. Hurricane Betsy was the last hurricane that had hit New Orleans as a direct hit, and that's when I was about 7 years old back in 1965. So I'm working at Laketran, and I am watching my hometown wash away. And my class reunion was scheduled for that weekend. I couldn't even speak in sentences. My family was evacuating. We're trying to stay in touch with cell phones, what's happening, what's going on. And all of these things I've talked about came together in that moment when I realized that everything in my life could be gone in one day. So I'm going to show you a little video about how these things came together. So I'm going to leave that sit for just a moment because I need to give you a little backstory on that. When I talk about relationships and talk about family, my family was safe. But my sisters were calling, and people here were going, Jessie, what can we do? Now, post 9/11, there was not a lot that the average citizen in this country could do to help with the tragedy that happened. Katrina taught us that we all have something we can do when there's tragedy on our own soil. As I said, my sisters and their families were safe, but they wanted to know, what do people need? What can we do? And she said they need pillows, they need dog food, they need clothes, they need anything you can think of, toiletries, toilet paper. So the magnificent people who work for Laketran, and I do mean magnificent people, put together supply drives all over the county. We gathered what we could, and in the transit world, there's this tiny window of time following a tragedy when a bus can go out of its own county to do something. So Morse Van Lines in Paynesville donated boxes. People took stuff home, washed clothes, sorted it, boxed it. We loaded up 2 buses and had a connection in New Orleans, go figure, it's kind of where I was from, with the senior department. And I said, Amy, where can we bring things? People want to bring it directly into the hands of people who need it. So she set us up with 2 distribution sites. One was largely seniors, the other was largely young families. So people got to help people put into their cars or get back to their homes those items they really needed. And that included, as you saw, some stuffed animals. And the little boy with the dog, we all lost it when we heard the story. He had lost his dog in Katrina. And so that puppy meant everything to him, even though this one was stuffed. But that was a big thing for us to learn. And the lady walking away with a walker, you don't think about the things people don't have anymore when floodwaters wash everything away. So that was all about the relationships. It was about the family. It was about caring for community bigger than ourselves. I always say it's like my big family here on Lake Erie was helping my big family down on Lake Pontchartrain to recover from something that they had no control over. I chose to show this tonight because in this country in the last 4 weeks we've had 3 major hurricanes devastate parts of this country. So there are opportunities, whether it's right now today, because after this trip, which was 6 weeks after Katrina, in June, the following June, we took 13 more teenagers down and continued to help with the rebuilding efforts. I personally would say I probably wouldn't drive cross country with 13 of somebody else's teenagers again, but it was great. But on this first trip, it was really neat. We had a few spots left open on the bus. So because I had been involved with community, I called a few high schools and said, I have a few seats on the bus. Do you have some really responsible students who might be willing to come with us? And they responded. So what Katrina taught us about management and leadership is that how we define community depends on us. Community might be the people living in your block. It might be the people living in the county. It could be the city of Cleveland. It could be the entirety of this nation or this world. But how we define community also defines what length we will go to protect it. And so define your community for yourself. At this point in your life, maybe it is just your neighborhood. But at some point in life, it might be more than that. Relationships are everything. The most powerful person at Laketran during all of that was not the general manager. It was the clerk, supply clerk. Because if Lois said, I need this, everybody did whatever that was. So leadership doesn't necessarily have to be a position or power, but it definitely has everything to do with the relationship. And sharing your heritage, it was, my sisters met us at the Jefferson Parish council offices at midnight when the buses arrived, put people into their cars, took them to their homes, fed them gumbo and red beans and rice, and made sure that they had quilts and something to curl up with that night before we went to go do our work the next day. And I would say that every person who went down there learned something new. From the students, and for students, I would tell you when you're hearing about these things, challenge what you hear in the media. If you'd have listened to the media, most of New Orleans were a bunch of thugs robbing stores, even if it was for food or other things. And what the students came back with was saying, we didn't expect people to be so kind, so gracious. We would be walking through a neighborhood and people would say, do you want to see what's left of my home? Do you want to see what's happened? They were more than willing to tell their story about what happened with Katrina. By the way, all of the photos in that video were taken 6 weeks after Katrina. The power of water to totally destroy things is amazing. And opportunities are there. You know, being present allows you to be aware of them. So I would say, you know, listen with your heart, because your heart is when you will know that a door is opening for you to step in through. So how in the world, back to school again? Really? I told you this guy was a troublemaker, right, Tom? Totally troublemaker. Bill Bauer and I served together on the Governor's Council with People with Disabilities. He is profoundly deaf. He was also at the time the chair of the education department at Marietta College. And he kept telling me I needed to go back and get my master's. And I kept saying, Bill, this is not going to work. James is in school, I'm busy, I got work, I got life, you know, not going to work. He said, Jessie, if we can make it happen with some flexible classes, would you do it? I'm like, yeah, go ahead, because I know you're not going to do it. Not going to happen, Bill. So I'm at Marietta. I'm either there long distance, I'm there in condensed weeks, I'm doing distance learning, I'm doing independent study, you name it, we're trying it. I get to my last class, and it's the history of education. And Professor McDonald is a curmudgeon, and he says, nope, if you want to take my class, you will be here on Marietta's campus 2 nights a week. From Cleveland. I'm distraught, I'm going, I'm not going to finish my master's. I can't believe it, I'm not going to get there because of one class. And we find there's a little loophole that says you can transfer one class in from another university and still get your master's from Marietta. So I had this fluke class. I'm at CSU in the history of education, and I again have a fabulous professor. So there we go, Cindy. It's here, it's at Marietta, it's at CSU. And he says, how in the world are you not in the doctoral program? I'm like, this is coming from somebody who went back to school when they were 40 to get an associate's degree? What do you mean, doctoral program? I had no intention of being in a doctoral program, but I was also kind of saying, but why not? So I started there with the intention that my research would be in leadership development for students with disabilities, because there really isn't much out there in that. So if anybody has a doctoral topic that they need pursued, there you go. But my topic of my dissertation ended up being the life narratives of those students who went down with us post-Katrina to serve in New Orleans, to talk about what happened in their lives that made them say yes to the call for service, the call for action, and what did it change in their lives. So I can tell you that of those original students, one of them is a medic, one is a policeman, one went into the Army Rangers, one just went into finance, but he left New Orleans and called his mom and said, I'm coming down here to school. And his mother was a guidance counselor and said, over my dead body, are you going to college in New Orleans? Not going to happen. But he ended up with a full ride to Tulane. So he did go to college in New Orleans and actually moved there and stayed there, and that had become his home for quite a while. So all of these things shape, how did I get here today? What does that mean to lead Leadership Lake County? Some days it's kind of daunting when I think about it, but it's really a thrill. I work with the best people the county has to offer. By the way, this was a picture from my doctoral program. My husband and I, flanked, both of us, by our best friends from middle school. That's a lot of friendship in those years. And this happens to be my cohort for the Alumni Hall of Fame. So I was pretty excited about that too. But Leadership Lake County It's very hard to describe what we do. But what we do, whether you're a sixth grader, a middle school or a high school student, early career, or a senior professional, we immerse you into your county one day a month. You will learn things about your county that you never had any knowledge about whatsoever. Is that Bob Vaughn I see back there? Woohoo! There's another favorite professor. I think I still have marketing papers I wrote for you, Bob. So we immerse you in the county, and then we give you a way to invest your time in the county, to have an impact in the county. So while we teach you about leadership and leadership skills, we also give you this big picture of how are the many, many ways you can get involved in the county. And I'm really thrilled that Leadership Lake County, for the past several years, has had at least 1 or 2 projects here at Lakeland, working with emerging leaders, providing graduate skill workshops for the business students. We have helped Project Hope with things. We have helped Birthright. We have helped United Way. You know, any nonprofit in Lake County who sends us a proposal, we try to find a way to take on that proposal and help. So that's really what leadership is about. It's not about who you're in charge of, but it's about what you do with what you're in charge of. And the only thing you're in charge of is you. So thank you. So are there any questions people would have? I'm here today. You know, I really am sincere when I say I feel very blessed every day that I get up. My motivation is that we live in a county that is very fortunate to have people who care. We are a very rich county when it comes to social services. If people need those services, they're there. But my motivation is really just to see people succeed and to get people excited about what they can do in their community. Great question, thank you. Any others? You know, I think, because sometimes, you know, people come in and, especially with our high school classes, we say, what does that mean to be a leader? And so often they'll say, well, it's the person in charge, or it's the boss, when I really hate that term, the boss. Because leadership is never about you. It's about who are you bringing along with you. So we like to say leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. So I think it's, you know, when you look at someone, who are they bringing along with them to succeed? You know, who else is coming along with them? You know, and I always say, I want my whole staff to know how to run Leadership Lake County. Because, you know, quite honestly, if the UFO comes and says, do you want to go for a ride? I'm all in. I'm going. I want to see what's out there in the universe. So I think it's really important that, you know, leaders are not hoarding talent, knowledge, or control as much as giving it out. So that's the thing we look for in terms of leaders. Who's making sure all the voices are heard at the table? Who's willing to be a mentor? I had great mentors, and that makes a world of a difference. And if you don't have a great mentor, imagine what one would be like and be that to someone. Thank you. Other questions? All right, I think it's Go Tribe time, so I think there's a brief reception outside. I'll be here if you have any questions. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It really was an honor to be here. Thank you.